When I was in my teens, I used to occasionally babysit my little cousin, Joey. Joey was always energetic and outgoing, and with him only being 6 at the time, I had to keep a close eye on him. On this night, my aunt was out of town for work. My uncle worked the nights as a cop in our town, so he'd occasionally stop by throughout the night to grab food or use the restroom. Because of this, I left the side door to the house open in case he stopped by. Sometime around 10, I put Joey to bed in his room upstairs. I'm usually a bit of a night owl, so I went back down and stayed up until about 2 in the morning. Whenever I babysit, my aunt and uncle let me sleep in the guest bedroom upstairs, right across the hall from Joey's room. Once I finally got myself ready for bed, I shut off the lights and laid down. For whatever reason, I was having a hard time falling asleep, so I was watching YouTube on my phone with my headphones on. Suddenly, I heard a loud bang. I paused the video and took off my headphones, trying to figure out where the sound came from. I wasn't sure if it was just my imagination, but I was certain that the sound I heard wasn't from the video I was watching. Shortly after, I heard footsteps walking around on the main floor, so I just assumed it was my uncle. Since I still couldn't sleep, I got out of bed a few minutes later to go say hi. I slowly tiptoed down the steps, trying to not wake Joey from his sleep. Now, this is when things really started to get weird. Once I made it to the main floor, I didn't see my uncle like I expected. All of the lights were off, and there was no sign of him. I walked into the kitchen and turned on the lights, then yelled, "Hello?" But there was no answer. I was starting to get a bit freaked out, so just to confirm whether my uncle came home or not, I looked out the front window to see if his cruiser or truck was there. The driveway was empty, and that was when I really started to panic. I knew what I heard. Someone was inside the house before I went down, and for all I knew, they were still there. I turned back up the stairs to my room, grabbed my phone, and called my uncle. The phone rang for a while, and just before I thought he wasn't going to pick up, he finally did. "Hey, everything all right over there?" I told him that I was fine, but explained that I was calling because I thought I heard him stop home. But when I said that, his cheerful expression changed. "No, I never stopped home. Why, what's going on?" I told him how I thought I heard the side door slam shut, followed by footsteps walking around the kitchen area. If I already wasn't panicking, his reaction to hearing that sent me over the edge. He told me to go to his room, grab his pistol from under his bed, go into Joey's room, and lock the door. I complied, and did just that, all while staying on the phone with him. He radioed into dispatch to alert other units, and he told me he'd be there in 10 minutes. Joey woke up during the commotion, obviously confused and scared, but I'm so glad he stayed quiet and didn't start crying. About 15 minutes later, several cop cars pulled into the driveway, accompanied by my uncle, and they escorted us out of the house. We waited in a patrol car as they searched the entire house, until my uncle finally came out, but he wasn't alone. I couldn't make out the face, but he was walking out a man in handcuffs. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It wasn't my imagination. Someone was inside the house with us the entire time. Well, fast forward to the next day, I finally learned what happened. My uncle called me and explained that a month prior, he had arrested the same man that was found inside the house that night. He had given him a DUI and charged him for drug possession, and the guy did not take it well at all. In his intoxicated state, he made several threats to my uncle that he would kill him and his family. My uncle deals with scumbags all the time, so he didn't take the threat too seriously, especially because he was going to jail. His bond was set at $10,000, and the night before he broke in, someone bailed him out. The man was found with a knife and rope after they pulled him out of the house. He was hiding in the closet on the main floor. Even to this day, I still don't like going over my aunt and uncle's house. Whenever I'm there, I'm reminded of that night with Joey when we were there all alone. I remember being frustrated that I couldn't fall asleep that night, but looking back now, I'm so lucky I stayed awake. If I'd been asleep, I never would have heard him enter, and I most likely wouldn't be telling this story today. Several years ago, I pushed really hard to make sure that my daughter got a cell phone at a pretty early age. My former spouse didn't really understand why this was such a big deal to me. I couldn't really explain it at the time, but I had a reason as to why I needed her to have a phone, and part of it was from my own experience as a babysitter when I was 14. I loved babysitting for Jack and Diane back then. Not only were they the coolest couple ever, but their kids were sweet and a lot of fun. They had a little toddler boy, Matt, and John, the baby. Jack was a biker, and he often picked me up on his Harley, which was the most amazing thing ever, and his wife loaned me a lot of her leather clothes to wear to rock concerts. They went out partying a lot, and it paid well. It was like a dream job. They were out clubbing that night. I had to put Matt to bed and rock John off to sleep. It was cold out, so they had taken the Mercedes instead of the bike. Several hours had passed, and it was around 2 a.m., and they still hadn't returned home. Even with checking on the sleeping kids regularly, I was getting pretty tired myself. Luckily, they didn't mind at all if I dozed off to sleep, which I did this night. At some point during the night, I woke up to a loud crash and my heart pounding. I had no idea what noise woke me up, and neither kid woke up. I laid there, frozen, on high alert, but I was completely silent. I started thinking that it might have been a dream, but for whatever reason, I was wide awake and terrified. I had just gotten my panic under control when I heard a car door slam shut. I looked out the window and saw they were home, so I went to open the front door. Diane came in, and one side of her face was horribly swollen, and she was bleeding. Stupidly, I asked, "Did you get into a fight?" She raced past me to the phone at the dining room table and started dialing. It was an old tabletop-style phone. Jack came in next, flying past me and screaming. He grabbed the heavy phone receiver from her hand and bashed her on the side of the head. Then he ripped the phone from the wall. She screamed back, holding her now very bloody face, and he smashed her head into the wall. She staggered, gushing blood into the bedroom, then walked out of sight. I heard more screaming and ugly sounds of blows landing when she came tumbling out of the bedroom, then was thrown through the hallway into the crib, in turn waking John. She crawled out of the room as he cried, and Jack dragged her into the hallway and screamed at the baby to shut up. I was terrified, and I didn't know what to do, so I went and grabbed the baby, cuddling him and turning him away from the image of his dad straddling his mom and choking her. The silence as he settled was almost scarier than the screaming. I didn't know if she was dead. I got John settled again and came back out into the living room. I did not know what to do. Diane was lying on the floor, broken, bleeding, barely recognizable, but somehow still breathing. Jack told me to sit down as he dialed a number on his cell phone. I slowly perched on the edge of the couch. Diane crawled to me, then gurgling words past the blood in her mouth. She begged me to protect her babies. All I remember thinking is that I was just a kid too. Soon after, a bunch of Jack's buddies showed up to the house. A few of them said they would take Diane to the hospital. Jack asked if I would stay with the kids, but as he said that, Diane started screaming that if I stayed, he would kill me. I said I just wanted to go home. One of the guys said he would call his wife to stay with the kids, and then they left with Diane. Jack looked at me and told me to get in the car, saying that he would take me home. I had no way to call for help or a different ride. The whole way home, I just tried to stay calm. The turn to my street was at the bottom of a hill. As we approached the turn, Jack kept telling me how he didn't want to go back to prison, saying that he would do anything to not go back. I kept nodding and agreeing as he took his foot off of the brake and drove past the turn. I looked at him, now completely horrified. "I just want to talk. I need to calm down before I go home to my kids, okay?" We ended up at an all-night donut shop. He had a coffee and donut, got me something, and spent more than the next hour telling me he was not a bad guy, trying to explain to me how prison had changed him. I was less than 5 kilometers from my home, but I had no way to call for help, and no one knew where I was. I just tried to be supportive and agreed with everything he said. Finally, we got back into the car and he drove me home. It was one of the longest nights ever. I woke up to a police cruiser outside my house. I learned that Diane refused to press charges. About a week later, I got a letter from her, apologizing for everything, taking all of the blame. I felt and still feel horrible for her. So, this happened a while ago when I was 17. My girlfriend, who was 16 at the time, was asked if we could babysit for her mom's friend. Since money was involved and we were broke, we obviously took the job. We went to the house at 2 p.m. For the first few hours, everything was going fine, and we were all just hanging out watching TV. The owners told us they'd be home sometime later in the evening, so we were thinking sometime around 8 or 9. However, a few more hours passed, and it was now around 1 a.m., and they still weren't home. My girlfriend messaged them asking what time they'd be home, but they never replied, so we thought to ourselves that they were out drinking and would hopefully be back soon. Prior to taking this babysitting job, the homeowners warned us that we were in a high-crime neighborhood, so they cautioned us to keep the doors locked at all times. Now that it was really starting to get late and we weren't in the best area, we were getting more and more agitated that they hadn't returned home yet. Around 1 a.m., I heard a noise outside. I turned to my girlfriend who was on her phone and asked if she heard it. "No, you're just hearing things." And I brushed it off. Around 10 minutes later, I was bombarded with glass. A brick had flown straight through the window, landing on the sofa next to me, just a couple feet away. Now having an adrenaline rush and not wanting to look weak in front of my girlfriend, I went outside to see if I could find the person who did it, but nobody was there, or so I thought. On the left-hand side of the house, there was an alleyway leading into both the back garden of the house and the neighboring house. It was pitch black, but being the brave person I thought I was, I turned on the flashlight on my phone to look down at it. As I did, I almost peed my pants. I saw someone, in a black hoodie, crouched down in the alleyway. We stood there, frozen, staring at each other for what felt like an eternity, before he finally threw himself towards me at full speed. I said to myself, "Hell no," and ran into the house, locking the door behind me as my entire body was shaking. When I got back in, the kids were already downstairs wondering what had happened, and my girlfriend was there to comfort all three, telling them it was nothing, even though they were old enough to probably know what happened if we explained it to them. She started to clean up the mess while I was on the phone to the police, fearing that the person was still waiting outside. The police came within minutes, took down our information, and told us that they would patrol the area, adding that they'd keep an eye on the house until the morning. About an hour later, the police knocked on the door again and gestured me to follow him to his patrol car. When I got to the car, I saw a man sitting in the back seat, hands cuffed. That was when the cop asked, "Is this the person who smashed the window?" I analyzed the person from head to toe, and he fit the description I gave to the police entirely. The parents finally got home, and they were obviously worried about their children's safety. However, they didn't seem surprised at all to hear of this happening. Instead, they thanked us, paid us, and we went on our way home, sometime around 4 a.m. A few days passed until I found out more about that night. It turns out that was the mother's crazy ex, who had full intentions of killing her. When he was taken into custody, they found a knife in his pocket. I still get chills when I think about that night. If I had tried to be brave and fight that guy, I would definitely be dead or seriously injured.